Hey, everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Cool Sports Network. I am your host, Chase Coburn, and today I am joined by a very special guest, an NBA writer and reporter for several media outlets, including Fox Sports Radio, CBS Los Angeles, the Sporting Tribune, and much more. Let's welcome Mark Medina to the show. Mark, thanks for coming on.
Hey, Chase, thanks for having me. Should be fun.
Should be a lot of fun. The NBA season is coming up, but just from a reporter standpoint, you have done so much in your career. I mentioned those are just three of the companies you work for, and you work for many more as well. Athlon Sports, I know, Sportskeeda. So you do a lot. When was that moment you realized this is what you wanted to do? And for the audience that doesn't know, what has been your career path since to get to the point where you're at now?
Well, to try to keep it short and efficient, I'll answer that in two ways. As far as part one, what got me into this career and when I knew I wanted to pursue this, it happened at an early age. I grew up an NBA fan. I loved watching basketball, loved playing basketball, but I discovered very early on in elementary school and middle school, I played basketball, but I wasn't good at it. And so I thought, well, I still love the game. I'm very intrigued with the broadcasts, reading the write ups in the newspaper, reading books about it. Let's try to make a career out of this. So, by the time I was in seventh grade, I joined the student newspaper in York, Pennsylvania. Did the same thing in high school. Did some stringing work covering high school football and basketball for my hometown paper with the York Daily Record. And frankly, one thing led to another. Went to college at Syracuse University, great journalism
Grade
school,
school.
got
Yeah.
involved with student media in newspaper and TV, and every summer, usually doing an internship. And then after that, wound up in LA as an intern, as a general assignment reporter in different departments. 6 months later, was able to be an entry level sports reporter. Following a very brief layoff, able to be on their web staff as a Lakers blogger, and that's what got me in the door in the NBA. Blogging about the Lakers for the LA Times, and then I became a Lakers beat writer for the LA Daily News, a Warriors beat writer with Bay Area News Group, and that resulted in national roles with USA Today and NBA.com. Now, given the current landscape that we're in these days, with a lot of turbulence, a lot of tough business models, there were some layoffs at NBA.com, and I was a casualty. But thankfully, I've had a robust portfolio, as you outlined very well, with a lot of freelance work on the editorial side, and I've already been doing a lot of TV and radio work. So I guess the lesson learned with that journey is there's a lot of unpredictable events, blessings, and challenges, but as long as you do the work and stay true to who you are, you can find a way to make it work.
Yeah, unfortunately, there were a lot of layoffs in many industries. I think after the pandemic, the COVID time, I think that just companies, it was much harder for them to work during that time for a lot of people. And so I can completely understand. But you continue to do great things, and it's amazing how much you have done. How do you manage all this? I mean, I haven't even listed all the things that you do. I know you do stuff for like you're a guest analyst with the Lakers. Like, how do you manage doing all these jobs and not only doing that, but doing it at a high level?
Well, thanks for the kind words. It's a very demanding job. It's time consuming. Thankfully, it's all centralized in the NBA. That's what I've wanted to pursue ever since I started becoming a Lakers blogger at the LA Times. So it's all tied together. Your schedule is, because I'm based in Los Angeles, primarily going to Lakers and Clippers home games, catching up with teams coming in, going to different practices, and then watching games at home. And when you're not doing those two things, trying to make phone calls and do some writing. How I make it work, um, I go all in. I love what I do, and I try not to cut corners. I also try to be efficient and purposeful with what I'm doing. It's just not about logging hours. It's making the most efficient use of that time with pursuing different ideas, trying to be creative with story ideas and pitches, lean in on relationship equity. I do have to give a shout out to my wife, Valerie, who's very supportive of my career path, and we've been great partners in supporting each other. And so I think to anyone that's listening, that's pondering, do you want to get in this field or not? I think there's a lot of great things with it, especially if you love the game of basketball and you love the craft. But you have to, I think, be cognizant of what you're signing up for, and are you signing up for the right reasons? If you are someone that wants a 9 to 5 job and off on the weekends and holidays, this isn't the field for you because you don't really that's not really available considering that NBA games are played at night, especially on the weekends, and to be able to make most of your opportunities, that's essentially your work schedule. But I think that there is a way to make things work as long as you're very purposeful with what you do, as well as have a growth mindset.
Absolutely, and that's been something I've been trying to learn as well as someone who's trying to get into any really industry in sports. I cover the NFL, the NBA, college sports, MLB, NHL, all that stuff. And so, as someone who's understanding that there are so many sacrifices you have to make as a reporter, but the upside of it is being able to cover the sports that we love, the sports that we would watch anyway, even if we weren't in the field. But in the field for you, you've been able to cover the Lakers and the Warriors during the 10 years. I know you've covered LeBron James, obviously nationally, Steph Curry, Kobe Bryant, Kevin Durant. The list goes on of the stars that you've been able to cover closely. From a reporter's view, it's so easy for a fan to rave about how good these players are and how much better they are than everyone else. But from a reporter's view, what makes these stars, both on the court and off the court, so much better than their peers?
It's a great question because there's so many layers to it. Obviously, they have incredible talent and skill set, but they don't rely on just that talent alone. They have a very purposeful work ethic where they tap into those efficiency metrics that I talked about, but they also put in the hours. They are obsessed and maniacal
Right.
with what they do. I think that they're all very in tune with how to take care of their body really well. A day off for Kobe and when he was around and playing, as well as LeBron and Steph and Durant now, is it's devoted toward recovery during the season so they can get ready for the next game, and the off season training so that they can keep their skills sharp. I think the other thing that really separates some of the stars here than some of the other players is that they really love the craft. I mean, let's not get it twisted here. Most NBA players are very competitive. They love the job at
Yeah.
their hand, but it's almost similar to really anyone in a job field. Some people, as they get older and have other responsibilities, some are there for a paycheck. Some are there that like what their job is, but they're not devoted to it 24/7. A lot of these superstar players are devoted to that. Now, without knowing exact details of all their private lives, there is kind of a cost benefit to that. But when we're looking at the NBA and evaluating top level talent, that's a very big separator that explains not just their superstar status, but also their longevity.
Correct. And you mentioned star players and like really loving it. And obviously he's still been able to succeed without maybe the love of the game, at least from the perspective of this. But like Nikola Jokic has mentioned that like this feels like a side thing for him. And it's very rare that you see players who like when during their interviews and stuff don't act like this is their life. And you see that. So I think Jokic is, I don't know if it's the rare exception because to be that good, you have to really work that hard. But it's just interesting you brought that up because Jokic is a very different player in that way and he works very differently.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair point because there's no right or wrong answer per se. And I think that there are players that are maniacal about their craft, but also try to have a good work-life balance. You mentioned Nikola Jokic. How about Spurs coach Greg Popovich, who's arguably the best NBA coach of all time, along with Phil
Yeah,
Jackson?
I'd say that.
He he really emphasizes the need to have a good work-life balance, to fill your cup. That's what Warriors coach Steve Kerr also implements. He's a Pop disciple. And I think the thought process is that if you're just always in grind mode and you're just devoted 24/7 to basketball, one, the fun out of it wears off. And two, it's the adage that this well-renowned author named Stephen Covey once wrote about when he was talking about the seven habits of highly effective people. One of the habits was finding a way to sharpen the saw. And he was saying if you're just going to be going 24/7 with your job, your saw is going to be dull.
Right.
And so, as a way to rest and find other hobbies, that's a way to sharpen the saw. So, I think that there is a way to do both. I think where the differentiation is when you have players that might try to cut corners with their regiment or maybe devote more of their off season toward partying than training. But there's certainly no harm in prioritizing family time, hobbies, because they're important parts of your life, but also can help make your job a lot more effective.
I think that is a great way of putting it. Finding that balance in any job that you're in, I think is so important. Now, the one guy that I think we can all agree is very passionate, or was very passionate about his craft and how good he was in basketball, was a guy named Michael Jordan. And that 72 win Bulls team is up there for the greatest team of all time in 1996. They won the championship. The storylines are incredible. One of the greatest teams, if not the greatest team ever. You were also able to cover the Warriors every single day of your life. And they were also up there as one of the greatest teams ever, those 2017, 2016 teams around that range. Who would you put as the more dominant team? And I get that's hard for you to say, obviously covering the Warriors so close compared to not doing so with Chicago. But with the background that you have, were the Warriors really that best team of all time that a lot of modern NBA fans give them credit to be?
It's a really tough question to answer, and it's not that I'm shying away from it or I'm afraid of whatever reaction. I'm not afraid of that at all. It's just that the Bulls and the Warriors were just so dominant in so many ways, but there's so many different unique circumstances where
Mhm.
obviously you had Michael Jordan, even though he's not number one on the all-time scoring list. I think from sheer dominance and will, he is arguably the best scorer of all time and one of the all-time competitors. And he had great depth and coaching around him with Scottie Pippen always there as a great number two sidekick, as a complimentary scorer and defender. In one area, you had Horace Grant as a great rebounder. Another area, Dennis Rodman. You had a lot of great role players like Steve Kerr, Tony Kukoc, Bill Wennington, Luke Longley to make this a complete team.
Right.
Obviously, great with Phil Jackson. When you look at the Warriors, you have a generational talent in Steph Curry. Much different player, obviously, than Michael Jordan, but the greatest shooter of all time. That changed the game with how teams strategize with trying to defend him, how they further prioritize the use of the 3-point shot. But he had a team that had strength in numbers. He had another great shooter with Klay Thompson, one of the most efficient scorers ever with Kevin Durant as part of those of his four championship runs. One of the greatest defenders all time with Draymond Green, ultimate glue guy, all versatile player, great locker room guy, Andre Iguodala, as well as Steve Kerr, who is a Phil Jackson uh, Greg Popovich disciple. I guess what
Something
I'm
too, yeah.
getting at is when you really outline the variables, it's really hard to separate which one's better because they're that great. But I will say this, having an up close view of seeing the Warriors during the 2017-18 season, 2018-19 season for all 82, the championship against Cleveland, and then the finals loss against Toronto, you had a really great appreciation for how they were able to achieve greatness on a night to night basis, as well as absorb everyone's best shot. Because every time the Warriors play another team, that was their Super Bowl. That was their time to try to make a statement and to have to live with that pressure. It's not about pressure, it's just more of the physical, mental toll of going through that day after day after day. And for the most part, they were able to survive that. The Bulls obviously went through that, but obviously I didn't have firsthand perspective of that. I only had perspective as a kid
Right.
growing up in the 90s, enjoying them from
Yeah.
afar. So it had a deeper appreciation for seeing it up close.
And we're going to talk about parity in the NBA later, but there is something that I miss about watching Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and this dominant Warriors team go to work. Even after the whole dynasty era was over, they've been one of those teams that have kind of reached that top and then fallen back down over these past few years with the amount of parity in the league. That was back in 2022. There's something about when Steph Curry dominates, and I can't explain it, but you know immediately that you're watching greatness, and then you just see it throughout the game, and you know exactly who is about to dominate. You know who is the best player on that floor, and he has flaws like every other player in the game. But as a player and as a person off the court, just from what I've seen, obviously you'd have a better perspective as a reporter. Curry just seems like an unbelievable star to just be around and watch as a basketball fan.
Yeah, he plays with amazing joy. And I think one thing that we have to keep in mind, people may think joy means happiness. Sure, but if there's another layer to that, it's about having a positive work environment. That's something that a lot of the Warriors teammates and Steve Kerr praise him for, that he sets the tone in creating a really good work environment. And on top of that, he's an amazing shooter. So he's had all these breakout games before Kevin Durant came on board. after Kevin Durant came on board. But I think one of the underrated parts of that Warriors dynasty with Kevin Durant is that it's easy to say, oh, yeah, it's inevitable they're going to win a championship. Obviously, the talent is separated, the separation in talent that the Warriors had compared to everyone else in the league was very vast. But we've seen in the history of the NBA super teams implode. And I think it's a testament to the Warriors coaching staff, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, and everyone else around them, all star teammates and role players, that there was a buy in and a blending of sacrifices where each person to a man could be, for the most part, representing what makes them so great, but also making necessary sacrifices as far as amount of touches, shots, and rolls so that they weren't fighting over all that. And I think that, the Warriors deserve a lot of credit for that. But in light of the fact that Kevin Durant got so much criticism going to the Warriors because he joined a team that already won a championship, already set the NBA record for most regular season wins, and all of a sudden these championships don't count. Look, he deserved those finals MVPs. And while the Warriors have certainly shown that they could win championships without him before and after his arrival, it wouldn't have been guaranteed that they would have won had Kevin Durant not gone on board. So he was, a very reliable option to be very efficient and consistent as a scorer. And as a result, the Warriors can thank their lucky stars that they have two extra championships during his time there.
Yes, they can, and I think one of the things you mentioned the leadership, and I think that's one of the things that is underrated when you look at Steve Kerr. A lot of Warriors fans, maybe not Warriors fans, but NBA fans have wondered, maybe it's time to move in a different direction with the franchise, but you can't do that to Steve Kerr just with the history that he has and how well of a job he has done. But you mentioned the whole thing about leadership and what it takes off the court to be that dominant. They already have the talent, but they need to have that positive, work environment that you talked about, and they had that. Who represented that? Because to me, a lot of people think Kevin Durant left the Warriors to be the number one guy on the court, and that could have very well been the case. I still think he was the number one guy on the court when he was in Golden State. That's why he won the two finals MVPs and made that huge impact in 2019. But was there an element that he wanted to have a locker room? Was Draymond Green and Steve Kerr and Steph Curry, all of these strong, passionate personalities, do you feel they were taking away from what Kevin Durant wanted to do as a leader? And maybe perhaps for the better, and they wanted to step up and be those leaders? What was the locker room like there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that humbles me in this business is we're not flies on the wall in the locker room. So, and we're not flies on the wall in the team meeting. So we don't know every single nuance here. But I will say this, as far as what I've been able to gather, being around the team and just analyzing it as an NBA reporter for quite some time. Even though this was a joyful environment that the Warriors usually had, it's not like it was kumbaya. At the end of the day, they're a professional team, and every player has the wants and needs that any other team would want, where players want to get paid, they want to win, and they want to make an impact with the way they play their game, offensively and defensively. But even though there are very well documented incidents that showed some tension, Kevin Durant and Draymond Green, their episode in the Clippers game after Kevin took a shot that wound up missing and it went overtime, and Draymond thought he should have passed him the ball so he could create on the fast break. There was an argument there. Obviously, his final season, Kevin Durant would make his feelings known that he didn't always see eye to eye with Steve Kerr's offense, the way he really prioritized strength in numbers, ball movement. He felt at times, because of how good of a player he is, sometimes the best option is to rely on him or Steph for that matter. Um, but I think what it came down to is this: even if those incidents didn't happen, Kevin Durant still would have left the Warriors, because I don't think it was about wanting to be the guy. I do believe him when he says that he wasn't jealous about the fact that Steph Curry was always going to be a more popular player because he was the homegrown generational star. I just think that he wanted to set out a new challenge. He already won championships, two of them with two finals MVPs with the Warriors. He had since discovered that those championships and any milestones with the Warriors would never be fully validated because of the team and talent that he's on that he's playing with. And so I think that it wasn't so much that he wanted to prove that he could win without the Warriors, but he wanted to see if he could accomplish that challenge because he had already accomplished what he set out to do with the Warriors. I think the other thing that's interesting, and he's been on record saying this, is that once he won a championship, he realized that that wasn't the only thing that would fulfill him. And so I think that that gave him perspective that, while obviously he loves to win, there's also other things that really fuel his why on why he competes. And one of those things that fuels him is he wants to play at a very high all star caliber and efficient level while still helping a team win basketball games. And I think he showed he could do that with the Warriors, and he wanted to show that he could take on a new challenge elsewhere.
Let's transition a little bit, but kind of stay on the same topic. I've had, I guess you could call it a hot take for a little while, and you may be able to touch on this just with your experience working with the Warriors. I think Andre Iguodala should be in consideration once he retires to be in the Basketball Hall of Fame. I think a lot of people don't give him credit for that Finals MVP. He had a great Finals. Should he have won it? I don't know. I was not old enough to witness that Finals while it was happening and really give a better perspective on that. But I just think his leadership, the impact that he made. I mean, when he came back to the team, I felt like he was a leader in the locker room. He won championships. We saw him be somewhat of a star in Philadelphia. He's just that type of player where like the accolades aren't there. I get the championships, but the personal accolades aren't there. But he'd be a guy that I would consider. With Derrick Rose recently retiring, I think the conversation of what the criteria has to be to make it to the Basketball Hall of Fame, to make it to Naismith, has been like a little questionable because when you look at D Rose, you have that 2011 MVP season. But do you have something else there? Is a lot of NBA fans' argument for those to say that Rose should not be in the Hall of Fame. So all of these things, and you could touch on those individual ones if you would like, but overall, what should the criteria be for a certain player to reach the Hall of Fame? Because that's not just anything, that's a prestigious honor. What do you think that criteria should be?
Yeah, it's a tough thing to answer because, frankly, the committee doesn't share what that criteria is. I mean, they don't have transparency. I think their thought process is they want to protect their own integrity and independence, but the outside public, including us, we don't know what that criteria is. Now, my personal opinion, what the criteria for the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame should be, is that when you think of the history of basketball, if you were to have to tell the story about the history of basketball, if you have to include that person with telling that full history, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. So, obviously with that, there's no brainer first ballot Hall of Famers when you're thinking about generational stars, all-star caliber players that won multiple championships. Same thing that goes with coaches, executives. Where it gets into the gray area is when you have players that contributed to winning basketball, but that weren't necessarily all-stars or, the main option on that team. The other gray area is when you are a multi-year all-star, but you were never part of a championship. But I think the main criteria is if you're talking about the history of the NBA, and it's an encyclopedia. It's not an article. It's an encyclopedia. Would that person need to be included in that? I think that could be the basic criteria. And as it pertains to Andre Iguodala and Derrick Rose, I think both of them should be in the Hall of Fame. Andre Iguodala, as you mentioned, before he went to the Golden State Warriors, he was a number one guy. He was an Olympian. He was an all-star. He showed that he could be a number one option on a team. He didn't become a number one option on a team once he joined the Golden State Warriors because he accepted that role and he mastered it very well. He was a jack of all trades, but instead of being a master at none, he was a master at everything. He knew how to score. He knew how to defend. He knew how to do all the intangibles. He knew how to protect his teammates. He knew how to uh, empower them, hold them accountable. He was the ultimate glue guy, but also playing at all-star caliber level. And I think that he does the all-star or the finals MVP for 2015. It's really tough because I thought Steph Curry played really well, but it's not like I was outraged that Andre Iguodala won finals MVP, even though LeBron James ironically was in the running for finals MVP for how brilliant he played at that series. Andre Iguodala made him work for his shots. His shots were inefficient when Andre was guarding him, And he put LeBron in a position where he had to choose, do I rely on myself or do I make the extra pass? And us knowing how LeBron is, he's always about making the right basketball play. But in that standpoint, a lot of times the right basketball play is to take matters into his own hands. And even though he did that, it wasn't efficient. So Andre played masterfully. Derrick Rose, I think the only potential knock on his candidacy would be the fact that toward the latter part of his career, he obviously had a lot of injuries. There's a lot of what ifs on what his career would have
He
been
may be the
like in
biggest what
terms.
if player in history just with all those
Yeah,
injuries. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, you can mention him or Yao Ming or
Yeah.
Arvydas
Oh, yeah.
Sabonis, but I think as it pertains to Derrick Rose specifically, um, even with his injuries aside, you saw he won an MVP. He was an all-star. He made such a huge impact on the Chicago Bulls. Nothing obviously is ever going to compare to the impact that Michael Jordan made on the Bulls, but he galvanized that Bulls franchise and showed that they could be a consistently winning playoff caliber team. And the only reason they didn't make any further runs was because of his injuries. But I still think, even when considering his injuries, he still deserves to be in the Hall of Fame.
In today's NBA, I think we've reached a new level of parity. I spoke about this on an episode of my podcast, just about all sports, because it happened in baseball this year too. No team reached 100 wins. It wasn't that type of year over on the diamond. But in basketball, it really wasn't like that either. And yes, there are dominant teams year after year, but we've seen 6 straight seasons now. We saw all those Warriors Cavaliers finals for 4 straight years, and all, the dynasty Warriors and all that. And now we've seen 6 new champions, and you haven't even had a team repeat and go back to the finals year after year or on a yearly basis. So, do you think this is good for the leagues? You've covered now the general NBA, what we're witnessing today, but then you also covered that Warriors team. You've gotten a perspective of both sides. Which one do you think is better for the game as a whole? Because a lot of people would say parity, 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 but now we have it, and a lot of fans don't like it.
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, it doesn't have to be an either or. I think that the people that would decry Warriors, Cavs, or even back in the day, it was Lakers, Celtics, and those were the only teams that had a chance. You want to celebrate greatness, and you saw a lot of greatness with all those teams. Now, for the league, it's not so much having parity because technically parity means it's equal, but does it mean it's high quality? Not necessarily. I think that it is good when there's competitive balance because all teams in every conference has a legitimate chance to make the playoffs or at least make the play-in tournament. I think in that aspect, in the modern NBA, basically since the Warriors championship run ended in 2019, as far as being repeat champions, that's been good. I think the bad part about kind of disrupting these dynasties is what we've seen come into play with some of these second apron penalties. I do understand and agree generally about wanting to ensure a competitive balance, not there be such a strong division between the haves and have-nots, big market, small market, etc. But when you look at certain teams that have made financial moves after winning a championship, some of it had to do with disrupting homegrown talent. You saw that with the Warriors. You saw that with the Nuggets. Maybe you see that down the line with Boston, Oklahoma City. I think that there needs to be a different criteria of second apron penalties or attacks of, if you're a high spending team on free agents, maybe there's more penalties for that because you don't want to necessarily just reward teams that can be the highest bidder. But why should you penalize teams that drafted a player really well and had the foresight and developed that player really well, and all of a sudden it's too expensive for them to retain that talent? Maybe you should reward that team for developing from within. And so I think they need to make a differentiator between that. And right now they haven't. I wouldn't be surprised at some point, maybe in 2 or 3 years they do that, but that's just speculation on my part.
Do you think the new CBA has been helping? Because I think it definitely has been better with the new aprons, but you're right. I still think there is some work that needs to be done within that. What are your thoughts on the new CBA? I say new over the past year or two as it's been created.
Well, look, everyone's richer. The owners, the players, the coaches. I think from that standpoint, the NBA should feel good about itself.
TV deals too. Look at that TV deal they
Yeah.
had. Goodness gracious, yeah.
Well, that it's trickled down. That's where most of the revenue comes from. So it all ties together. Now, the penalties that I mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of. I think the other thing, this isn't necessarily related to the CBA, but we're talking about the quality of the
Right.
product. Um, I do understand why, and I validate the importance of franchises and players, having the long view when it comes to maximizing their career and not just kind of going the old fashioned way and playing through injuries and putting themselves in a vulnerable position. But they should be able to do that without, I think, uh, watering down the excitement of a regular season game. And some of that, there's no way around it. You can't replicate the same excitement you had in the 80s and 90s for a few reasons. We're in a different era. You can watch any game at any time of the
Yeah.
week. You can watch it streaming. You can look at it on your social media feeds,
You can watch, like, I
etc.
feel like high school games, like
Yeah,
D3 high school games at this point,
yeah.
yeah.
So in other eras, there was more of a novelty of being able to see a game on network television, initially on tape delay, then live, and then a few games on cable. Now you can see every single game on streaming. You can replay it whenever you want. So because of that, it's inevitably going to feel different. But I think that you still need to have importance to the game for the fan experience, for the fans that are attending the game in person for the first time. That I don't think that there should be all this outrage if a player misses a game because they're hurt. You're playing the long game, and theoretically, if players and franchises are doing that, fans will have even more opportunities to see those players play in more seasons. But there also shouldn't be a cavalier approach to, oh, this is just one of 82. There should be an excitement and a purpose for every player on every team to get up and compete. And, sometimes you see that, sometimes you don't. And when you don't see it, I think it hurts the product.
You currently cover a lot of the Lakers and Clippers in Los Angeles. You mentioned the whole like injury thing. It kind of brings up the whole topic of load management. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard has been one of the main players for that, but you also see LeBron James, some of these more veteran players and more injury prone players on both sides of LA with basketball have kind of had this load management and they'll rest when they don't feel right. And like for a while now, I've been trying to go and see a game for LeBron James, but it's just do you want to take the risk and buy great seats and then you don't even know if he's going to play? So, do you think there needs to be more restrictions? They made the whole rule about not qualifying for awards, if you're 65 without 65 games or whatever. But I still think, like, if you're LeBron James or Kawhi Leonard, they've already won all the awards. Like, do you think there needs to be more? And money probably won't do it either because they're so right. How do you or should you penalize players for load management?
Yeah, nothing's ever going to be perfect, but I think right now what they have, it's as good as it's going to get. There's more transparency with reporting injuries and exact significance of it so that the NBA knows for sure that these injuries are legitimate. I think that there has been some pushback on the player participation policy. Like you mentioned, you look at some players like Tyrese Halliburton and Joel Embiid. There are people in both of their camps that suggested that they returned sooner that they should have because they wanted to protect that fact. But I think what we've seen is that it's incentivized some of the players that weren't nursing significantly serious injuries to still play, while also validating some of the very serious long-term injuries are real. Now, in Kawhi's case, his injuries aren't manufactured, they're real. But I think it is telling that he played 68 games last season. Um, and that coincide with player participation. Now, I would
Right.
say, in fairness to him, he's been dealing with a lot of injuries, basically ever since his quad injury in San Antonio. So these injuries aren't, manufactured. He wants to play.
Terrible to see him getting hurt
Uh,
now too. And we
Yeah,
thought he
it's
finally
it's
kind of got
it's
out of it. Yeah.
terrible. It's terrible, but I think that the more guardrails you can have, I think that there can be a better, healthy checks and balances and making sure that teams aren't doing anything rash that the medical staffs would say are too dangerous, but they're also, making sure that teams, players aren't shielding behind that as an excuse.
I watched the Olympics this year, and going into it, viewers of my podcast listening to this right now probably know I had the crazy take that not a lot of people had. I had the U.S. men's basketball team not getting gold, and obviously they did, so I looked like an idiot. But at the same time, we saw many moments where we thought, is the U.S. actually going to squeak by, especially that game against Serbia? And my logic around it was the U.S. is not the powerhouse it was in the 1992 Dream Team. Do they have the talent now? Yes, but there are also other countries now that have the talent. The NBA has gone global. The past 6 MVPs and many other stars today, guys like Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, guys who haven't won MVP but could in the next few years. Victor Wembanyama is a generational prospect. All these guys are from foreign countries and they're from overseas. And I think the Olympics showed that the U.S. is no longer the only area for basketball talent. How come do you think the NBA has gone so global with so many players from foreign countries representing a North American league?
Yeah, well, I mean, it starts the 92 Dream Team. I mean, that really exposed a lot of international players to basketball, and it really inspired them. It also gave a real clear barometer at that time that the US can simply roll the basketball and dominate anytime it wants against international competition. Obviously, there's a lot better talent, more continuity, more coaching internationally. And I think that what we saw in the Olympics here, it wasn't a surprise. We've seen the global growth in the game. We've seen international players win
Right.
MVPs. We saw last year a lot of international stars being representative of that year's Hall of Fame class. But I think that it further illustrated that it's not a foregone conclusion that Team USA will win gold. And it also showed that for USA to win gold, they had to feature the best of the best. It required LeBron James and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry not only to play on that team, but required them to play at their absolute best. And so, as it pertains to 2028, I think everything is up for grabs because none of those players, LeBron, KD, Steph, I don't think are going to play in 2028 because of where they're at in their career. And so right now, there's a lot of players on the Olympic team that are younger that I think you could pencil in. Anthony Edwards, Tyrese Halliburton, Jason Tatum, he'll get more playing time this go around. Jalen Brown, he won't get snubbed. Um, and let's see who else. Cooper Cup, he'll probably show that he's worthy
For
of all the
yeah,
hype.
yeah.
Yeah. But we have to look at the international growth elsewhere. What will Victor Wembanyama look like in 2028? Nikola Jokic, is he still playing at MVP level? How about Luka Doncic? So it's going
Who
to
knows what
be
Zachary Reese-Shea, Baila Coulibaly, Alex Sarr,
yeah, and
what are those
Alex
guys from
Sarr,
France
yeah,
doing? Yeah.
Alex Sarr, yeah. I mean, France, I think could be a stacked super team. So, um, the U.S. they will be a force, but they got a lot of work cut out for them, and it starts with just figuring out who's going to be on that team to begin with.
I do think it's great because the National Football League, you hear it, the National Football League, it's mainly, not just mainly, all 32 teams come to the United States and they made so many efforts. They go to London every year for all these games and they put like the games that nobody wants to watch because it's like the 9:30 Eastern, but like they're trying to do whatever they can to like to show people from other countries what the NFL is like. And I think the NBA kind of has an advantage in that way. And whether it started from the dream team or not, they have all that international talent. And I think it makes the game much better and you get so much more of a global audience. Mark, you've been covering the NBA for a long time. And I usually ask people, who do you have winning and all that? But anyone can answer that question, probably make a great argument, and their answer could be correct. But from a reporter's view, you've been able to be on the court, cover teams, be in the press boxes. You've been able to experience not what the life of an NBA player is, but just being involved in this sport. Why is the National Basketball Association so special to cover? Why is it one of the greatest sports across the world that continues to revolutionize sports as it is?
Well, there's a lot of superstar talent that do superstar things, and there might be people that think the NBA season's too long. I think it's just great because you have so many games to go to. There's always another cool thing that you can witness. But at the same time, there's a rhythm to the season and the postseason where you can kind of anticipate things and also see how this whole journey plays out with certain players, certain teams. There's, I think, a real moment of rites of passages that we see throughout that season because it's so long. But I think when it comes to the playoffs or when it comes to special moments, there's just so many opportunities for any star player to have one of those moments. And I've been blessed, even though in my lane, I don't have a rooting interest in outcome. It's not like when I was covering the Lakers, I'm rooting for the Lakers or rooting against them for that matter. Same thing for the Warriors. I just root for good stories and be able to meet deadline, and also like where I'm working at. But it is cool from just a fan of the game to be able to see cool moments. You know, I saw Kobe play out of his absolute mind before he tore his Achilles. Now, there were a lot of bad basketball I did see from Kobe after that, but I think that there was intrigue about how is he going to be able to overcome, three season-ending injuries all the way to his final season where he's getting a farewell tour. He got 60 points his final game, and then
Only Kobe does that. Like,
yeah,
no
only
star
Kobe
can
does that on
60 on his
50
final game.
shots.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and you fast forward with the Warriors. I mean, seeing Steph Curry and Klay Thompson shoot lights out. Same thing with Kevin Durant. I would also say it wasn't just about Kobe with the Lakers. Seeing Pau Gasol be, one of the best European players ever in the history of the game, and Ron Artest, one of the best defenders in the history of the NBA game, do their thing with the Warriors. I saw Klay Thompson set a previous record for most NBA threes in a single game. I was able to see Steph Curry obviously have breakout performances on a night to night basis. Same thing with Kevin Durant. Saw Draymond Green have, shut down defensive efforts against, top tier opponents. So that part of it's cool. Any single night, you might see a highlight reel, but on the nights that you don't see highlight reels, there's still a lot of interesting stories to tell.
Mark, thank you so much for being here. And you did touch on it a little earlier, but I have a lot of my viewers are aspiring announcers and reporters and journalists just like me here. And so speaking with someone like you has been incredible. What would be that one piece of advice you would give to someone like me or another kid listening to this right now?
I would give two pieces of advice. If you want to get in this field, do the work. Try to get hands-on experience, whether it's something you're doing on your own or a place that will allow you to have that experience. You know, watch the games, read books, read articles online, watch the broadcast, become a real student of the craft as far as being familiar with the past work, but also being familiar with the current work and be versatile with how you tell your stories. It's not just about writing, it's also about being able to do TV and radio and vice versa, as well as social media. And, I'm an example of, for better and for worse, growing into a field where there was a lot of turbulence happening all at once, where the traditional legacy companies are going through different financial hardships, but there's still a value in newspapers, TV, and radio. But you also have to learn new skills with adapting to social media, embracing all that without losing some of the fundamental, old fashioned skills. I think that if you're able to kind of be a bridge of, you know, leaning on institutional knowledge and appreciating the past, but also having a growth mindset to be adaptable and not be the person to be like, oh, well, back in my day, or that's not how it was before. You got to be able to evolve while still staying true to yourself. And I would say the second thing is just be honest with yourself. Like, is this something that you really want to get into for the right reasons? Because you're going to be sacrificing weekends, evenings, holidays. And if that's not something you want to do, it's understandable. I mean, there's a lot of family priorities, work-life balance priorities, but don't get into the business because you think, oh, you're going to make a lot of money, or oh, I get to watch the games for free, or I get to see the players. The bottom line is all those three things. Making a lot of money is not guaranteed, but all those three things, even if it happens, kind of the excitement of that wears down the more and more you're into it. And what
Right.
exposes whether you really like it or not is whether you actually like basketball and you're about putting the work. So I think if you stay true to those two things, it'll help crystallize whether A, you want to get in the business, and two, if you do want to get in the business, a good, I think, guide to succeed in a very turbulent field.
Mark, thank you so much for joining us today, for that piece of advice, and for all the things that we talked about. You've had such an incredible career, and to be able to take a look at those experiences and your thoughts and all the different opportunities that you have was truly incredible. We appreciate you coming on and talking about all those types of things.
Hey, Chase, appreciate you having me. It was fun talking basketball with you.
It was a lot of fun for the audience who's listening to this. Please be sure to check out. I'll put all the links to all of Mark's places where he writes and where he covers everything. So the links, if you want to follow Mark and all of his content, are in the description. Again, we really appreciate you coming on today and doing this with us. And we wish you a great NBA season.
Thanks so much, and right back at you.
Let's do it. Alongside Mark Medina of Fox Sports Radio and all the different places that he's at, I am your host, Chase Coburn. We will see you next time right here from the Cool Sports Network. Take care.